This session will provide you with guidance on the structure and content of your 6th chapter for your dissertation, which is the personal development set chapter. Here on this slide I've given you some guidance on some of the reading that you may need to do in order to frame your analysis and reflect on your personal development. 2 of these books are available electronically online through the library. First one is Armstrong's Handbook of Management and Leadership, and you ought to be looking at part 4 of this book, not the first 3 sections, but part 4, which focuses on management skills. And then you've got Stella Cottrell's book on Skills for Success. That's available through Palgrave Macmillan, and it's also available online. We've also looked at, in the personal development module in the first term, Margerson and McCann's team profile, which will be useful for you to actually reflect back on that. David Kolb's learning style inventory, which many of you looked at, and Wetton and Cameron's book Developing Management Skills. Chapter 1, it focuses very much on self-awareness, and many of you have actually referred to that in your personal development assessments. The areas that you need to reflect on in this chapter is issues around raising your own self-awareness, looking at your profile, your learning style, your attitude to change, your emotional intelligence, and reflect on the stages of learning that you've been through in developing these particular skills that you've developed over the year, including the process that you've been through in terms of the personal or self-development process. And you can actually utilise evidence from your journal or your reflective report to actually discuss some of the areas that you've been able to work on and develop throughout the course. I think you should begin with this chapter by discussing the role of self-development and personal development. I've provided a link here in the presentation to an online source which takes you through that personal development process and gives you some further guidance on that. And what you should be doing is looking at, as you move through the chapter, discussing how you've developed your skills over the year through your involvement in the MA and the project. So not just the project itself, but the overall on the MA throughout the year. Just to remind you of the personal development process and what it involves. The first thing is to do with raising our own self-awareness and understanding the skills, qualities and attributes that you have. And then deciding what you want to improve upon and what you need to learn or change in order to actually fill in the gap between the skills that you've currently got and the skills that you want to develop and want to have by the time you finish the course. Consider how you applied methods of learning and how you were able to assess your progress. So what I'm looking for here is for you to actually provide some evidence, some examples of how you were able to improve specific skills, whether it was to do with your time management skills, self-organisational skills, particular technical skills or IT skills that you were able to develop yourself as part of your self-development or personal development journey. There are a number of models or frameworks related to self-awareness. The one which I've put up on this slide is one we've been through previously, which was taken from Wetton and Cameron's model of self-awareness, where they identify 4 broad areas that you can actually reflect on as part of your self-assessment. And we've been through these before. The first one is looking at your personal values. What kind of values help you make decisions or actually guide you in terms of what you do. Second area is relating to your attitude to change, how adaptable you are, how flexible you are in certain situations, and how that has an impact on how you approach things. Third area is to do with your emotional intelligence, looking at how you're emotionally aware and in control of matters, both for yourself, but also being aware of other people's kind of emotional cues and how you actually react to those. And the fourth area, which Wetton and Cameron refer to, is to do with different learning styles, the way in which you gather and process information. We looked at Kolb's learning style inventory, but there are others. There's a number of others that you could actually refer to, so you don't have to just think about David Kolb's model of learning. There are other models which you could actually look at and reflect. In terms of attitude towards change, in Wetton and Cameron's book, they refer to two particular models that can be used to actually assess your attitude to change. One of these is Rotter's locus of control, which I think many of you have actually looked at previously, and there are other kind of models that you can actually look at other than this, but that gives you kind of an idea of what you might want to consider when looking at your attitude to change and how you can measure that. Emotional intelligence relates to the ability to manage your own feelings and manage a relationship with others. And as it identifies on the slide, that this concerns with your ability to manage yourself, but also your ability to respond to others and be able to respond to them in ways which reflect that you understand the kind of situation they're facing and you're able to actually deal with that in a very with empathy and with support. The diagram shows Marge Harrison McCann's team management wheel, which identifies the kind of role that you prefer to take on, and there are 8 different kinds of roles that you can take on, starting with reporter advisor and going all the way around the wheel to upholder maintainer. This is something that you don't necessarily have to relate to within this, but it's a useful way of actually beginning to understand the kind of attributes that you have as part of the kind of initial self-awareness phase. So this is one of those models which you may want to consider and discuss what your preferred team role was and what that means to you in relation to how you approach things, and whether that suggested that there were things that you needed to perhaps look at and amend in order to be able to work in different roles within the teams that you've been working in over the year on various different projects and presentations and such forth. In the personal development module, one of the models of learning that we looked at was this 4-stage model, where you go from being unconsciously incompetent in a particular skill that you have to then being aware that you're incompetent, so whether you move into a conscious level of incompetence before you then move on, having carried out some learning, that you become consciously competent in being able to do things, but you're very conscious about how you actually approach these things. And over time, as you develop those skills develop, you become unconsciously competent in being able to do things really without thinking. So you may want to consider what stage of learning you are at with the certain skills that you're considering as part of your own personal development. David Kolb's model of experiential learning, which is shown here, is something again that we looked at in the personal development module. But this can perhaps help you in terms of understanding where you actually started and what kind of observations, reflections enabled you to understand areas of skill that you had or strengths and areas of weakness. And you may want to consider how you used this learning cycle to help you actually develop particular skills, and consider how you went through this cycle in developing your particular skills and attributes over the course of the year. As I identified right at the start of the presentation, one of the kind of frameworks you may want to look at would be Kolb's learning style. and looking at the characteristics that you display, and being able to actually consider what kind of learning style you have and how that has had an impact on how you've gone about developing and learning new skills and knowledge as part of your own self or personal development. One model that you can use to actually demonstrate how you've developed certain skills and been able to evidence these would be the STAR technique, which I think I've mentioned previously. And this is where you actually set the scene, you set the situation, what's the situation that you faced, and describe the task, what you were trying to do in terms of developing and applying new skills. So you actually describe the purpose of what you're trying to achieve as part of this process, and then action, explain what you did in that situation in order to actually apply specific skills that you've been looking to develop, and then identify what the result of that taking that action was, how you're able to actually improve the way in which you handle certain situations through the skills that you developed. So this is one way in which you're able to actually look at this and provide some evidence relating to how you've gone about improving your skills in a particular area, and being able to actually provide some evidence to support that. Because I think within this chapter, when you're reflecting on the skills that you've developed, you do need to think about how you're going to evidence that. And what I'll be looking for when reviewing the drafts related to this chapter is looking at where the evidence is. Concrete examples which explain and identify how you've been able to apply a particular skill in a particular situation, which have enabled you to actually overcome some of the problems you'd had in relation to that particular skill or technique. I've listed some further reading here for you to look at. Some of these will be available electronically, so just when you go onto the library website and look through one search, some of these will be available electronically, others won't. So but there are plenty of other texts besides these. I know the Parker and Stone one, Developing Management Skills for Leadership, that's not available as a electronic version, but I've given you some further guidance at the start of this presentation on 2 or 3 texts which are available electronically, so you can actually access those via the internet. This would be the penultimate chapter to the dissertation, the final chapter being a conclusion section. So what we've done is we've gone through the 5 sessions this term. Each session has looked at a particular chapter, and this chapter, personal development, will be your 6th chapter, your first chapter being introduction. This will be your 6th chapter and your penultimate chapter for the dissertation. What I'd suggest you do, I will not need you to submit this as a separate draft. I'll need you to submit this as part of your initial draft in the middle of July. So if you need any guidance on this, please don't hesitate to contact me. But also, before contacting me, do have a look at some of the examples that I've provided on Moodle to help guide you in terms of how to structure this chapter and the content and some of the kind of models and frameworks which you'll be used to help you reflect on your personal development over the course of the year.